On today's Murder, She Wrote podcast, look at all the fancy lights on Broadway. I'm going to New York. If I can make it there, I'd make it anywhere. We find ourselves in New York, on Broadway, in one of my favorite episodes of Season 1. Hello and welcome to the Murder, She Wrote podcast, where I watch every episode of the hit 80s/90s show, Murder, She Wrote, starring 3-time Academy Award nominee and 5-time Tony Award winner, as well as multiple Golden Globes, Miss Angela Lansbury. Today we're going to be talking about Season 1, Episode 13, Broadway Melody. Air date January 16th, 1985. Guest starring the fabulous Luna Lunt. Today is her birthday, so I want to wish her a very happy birthday from the Murder, She Wrote podcast. I don't think she'd actually listen to this, but you never know. So I hope she had a terrific day, and it seems fitting that I'm covering this episode today of all days. So I hope she has a wonderful birthday. In your visual aid, you are looking at the collage that I have made for this episode, and I will explain what you're looking at as I go along. Whew, this is one of my all-time favorite episodes, so let's get started. And this is one of the very first episodes that is filmed entirely on the Universal backlot. From now on, all the episodes you see set in different locations will be filmed on the Universal backlot, made to look like they're in those locations, but they're actually not. Alright. So we start off this episode in a random New York apartment where we get introduced to Rita Biscoe, a famous ex-movie star who is sitting there watching one of her old movies. She is played by Vivian Blaine, and she's watching one of her old films called Two Little Girls in Blue, released in 1946. And Luna Lunt is the daughter of Judy Garland, and she plays her daughter, Rita's daughter, in the show. And Angela Lansbury starred alongside Judy Garland in The Harvey Girls, where she played the villain of that picture. She played a saloon girl, and she was the villain of the picture. Unfortunately, she didn't do her own singing in that movie. Her voice was dubbed. Angela Lansbury's voice was dubbed, even though we know she can sing fabulously. And she's gotten 5 Tony Awards to prove it. But they felt that she did not sound like a saloon girl, so they dubbed her voice. And since she was the villain... excuse me. And since... I'm so excited. Since she was the villain of that movie, she had a setback with her film career for a little bit because Judy Garland was considered America's sweetheart around that time. So Rita Biscoe is the woman in red with the scarf on in the top part left corner. Underneath her is, of course, the book, Murder, She Wrote, in the opening. Had to put that in there. And they're watching one of her old movies together, and Barry, her son, Barry Biskin, comes in and announces that they're going to be on Broadway. They got the backing from an investor named Sal. Mrs. Fletcher gets a call from Grady. This is Grady's first appearance, I believe, in the show for the first time since the pilot movie. I could be wrong, so don't quote me on that. I can't remember. But he's a recurring character throughout, and he has a new girlfriend, which will also be a recurring theme throughout the show. He'll have a different love interest until he eventually gets married in one of the seasons that I don't remember which season that happens in. He is working on the taxes for the show and invites Mrs. Fletcher to come see it. She says she will be too busy with various meetings with publishers and lectures and that sort of thing, but she'll try to make it. Basically, Grady tells her that everyone is getting along on this show, but we find out that's not true. In the visual aid that you see of Rita Biscoe, the reason why she's angry is because she's doing one of her musical numbers and she bumps into that prop that is behind her, sort of next to her. And to me it kind of looks like the street lamp that Gene Kelly used in Singing in the Rain. I could be wrong, but it kind of looks like that. And she goes, whose idea was it to rearrange the props so that I kill myself? The director, Mitch, gets up and basically says that her performance is kind of lying there and she's not giving it her all. And they've been rehearsing for about 2 months now. So it's about 2 months later after the introduction at the start of the episode. And we also, when the episode starts, get a beautiful stock footage thing of the Twin Towers and the New York skyline. So beautiful. So after this, Rita storms off and goes into her dressing room, and Patty is told to do her number, which is in the visual aid on the right of your screen, is Patty singing her musical number, I've Been Through All of That Before. And Luna Lunt is a beautiful singer. I mean, of course, it's in her genes. Judy Garland was her mother, and her sister's Liza Minnelli. Her voice is like a combined of both of them, and wow, is she good. Some of her music is on Spotify, and you should totally listen to her, because she is such a fabulous singer. Also, if you ever wanted to know anything there was to know about Judy Garland, read Luna Lunt's book, Me and My Shadows, which they turned into a movie in the early 2000s, which starred Tammy Blanchard as a young Judy Garland and Judy Davis in the later years. The last time that there was attention to detail in the miniseries on TV was when they did that. So if you ever wanted to know anything about Judy Garland, I encourage you to read her book, because it is absolutely one of the best books I've ever read. But we'll talk a little bit more about Luna a little bit later when I talk about the guest stars in this episode. Some of them are very recognizable. So she practices her number, and it gets interrupted by her mother and Barry backstage as they talk. Barry says he's sorry that his mother is upset and asks if she wants him to fire the director. She says no, that he's the best they can get, damn it. So she has to keep him. So later that same night, Jessica comes into town. Grady makes sure to meet her at her hotel and basically tell her about that Regina has requested her presence at dinner, and that if she does not show up, Grady might get fired. And this is the only part in the episode that really confused me. Even though Rita invites her to dinner, Jessica is sat at the opposite end of the table next to Sal and the director, and doesn't even get to talk to Rita during dinner. Barry gets up and proposes a toast, stating that they are basically going to skip previews in Boston and go directly to Broadway in 2 weeks, which I guess is something in Broadway that you don't do. You do previews in other cities first to see how the show goes, and then you go to Broadway. So the director does not seem to be very pleased with this and decides to roll his eyes. Sal tells Mrs. Fletcher that he used to be a bank broker, and decided to get into the business of Broadway because it seems to be a booming industry, and he got boring with just doing business transactions. So he's got a lot riding on this play. Mrs. Fletcher ends up going in Sal's limo to her hotel, along with Grady. They offer a ride to Barry and Patty, but Barry insists that his car is in a garage, which is in an alley. They go past a blind man who is preaching, as well as a man who is doing a card game. And they go into an alley, and a random man steps out and says, "Give me your jewels, lady," but before Patty can hand him her wallet or purse or whatever, he shoots her. And Barry takes out his gun and shoots him back in turn, which kills him. This guy's name is Monty, and Mrs. Fletcher feels that something is wrong about this whole thing, that he didn't even take the jewels first before he shot her. She suspects that his whole purpose was to shoot her and not to rob her. Mrs. Fletcher tracks down the guy that was taking people's money of bets of what card that he has hidden in 3 cars he has on cards, like a deck of cards. Like say the ace of spades is in the middle, and if he flips it over and it's actually the king of diamonds or something, you lose. So it's one of those sort of gambling games that people on the street, I guess, used to do in the 80s in New York. I don't know, never been there. Would love to go there, but never been there. So she tracks him down, and they have food at some sort of restaurant outside, and he puts a bunch of Tabasco sauce on the sandwich that she's eating, and she goes, "Oh my lord, spicy but good," and she takes a glass of water, and he says, "Look, lady, I don't really know anything." He said, "The reason why I ran is because the cops would have took me in regardless, because I shouldn't have been on that corner at that time doing that." He said, "The only thing that I know is that it was strange. The man asked for the jewels, but he shot before she could give them to him. That doesn't make any sense because no robbers ever do that." Mrs. Fletcher's more than convinced. There's a chance that Barry could be charged with carrying a concealed weapon since he did shoot the dude dead. The lieutenant offers him carrot sticks and also offers carrot sticks throughout. Unfortunately, the lieutenant in this episode is one of those stubborn detectives that refuses to listen to anything Mrs. Fletcher has to say, and of course makes him the annoying aspect of the episode. He refuses to listen to her theories, and refuses to listen that there could be more to the story than just a mugging gone wrong. Later that night, while Mrs. Fletcher is at Grady's apartment and they're about to have spaghetti, she then sees, because when she was with the detective earlier that day, he let her see a picture of his dead body in the morgue. So later that night, when she's watching TV, she sees him on television. She then goes back to the detective and says, "There, he is on this video. He was an actor, or at least he used to be. So that proves my theory. He wasn't just a random mugger. Perhaps someone hired him to shoot Patty." Meanwhile, at the theater, the director has decided to recast the role that Patty had played in the musical with an up-and-coming famous actress named Lonnie, who arrives in a rather large fur coat and basically takes over the role. Sal convinces Barry to allow this to happen, and Patty wakes up and there's no paralysis or anything. Regina then asks Mrs. Fletcher over. They go to see Patty, and Patty tells her that the show must go on. and she should keep going. So Regina invites Mrs. Fletcher over and they have coffee, and she says, I always keep a pot boiling because I love coffee, and I agree with her. She basically tells Mrs. Fletcher how booze, basically alcohol, ruined her career, and it also almost ruined her relationship with her children. So she vowed to get off of it. And she's been off of it for 17 years, and she found a bottle that has not been opened in 17 years and wonders if she should open it. She then starts crying and wonders why Patty was shot, and Mrs. Fletcher consoles her. When the detective is no help whatsoever, Mrs. Fletcher decides to do some investigating on her own. She tracks down Monty's old manager at a restaurant and he gives her his address, and she goes there. His landlord, who I guess runs a boarding house for struggling actors, says that she's shocked that he was mugging someone in an alley. She said especially given the fact that some new man that he would only call the money man promised that he would produce his ridiculous script that he had been trying to get people to produce for years, and that he would even let him produce it and star in it. So it seemed unlikely that he would be robbing someone in an alley. Mrs. Fletcher then asks for his credits, and when she looks at them, she comes to the conclusion that whoever benefited and needed money would target Regina next. So Mrs. Fletcher goes into a taxi, tells Grady to go back to the restaurant to get the list of credits, and she runs to Regina's apartment. They break in and find her on the floor next to the empty bottle that she talked about earlier and a bottle of habituates. And the oven door open with the gas on. She's rushed to the hospital, and Mrs. Fletcher has found out through a mutual acquaintance that Sal has basically sold parts of the musical to other people and is hoping that it will fail. So everyone is there, and including Patty, who says it's all my fault, I told her to keep on going with the show. This sucks. And then a doctor comes out to reveal that Regina has died as a result of the alcohol, the habituates, and the gas from the stove. The next day, Mrs. Fletcher decides to go over to Regina's house to help Barry with the arrangements for the funeral. But Mrs. Fletcher surprises us all in one of the best confessing scenes in the history of Murder, She Wrote starts to take place. Mrs. Fletcher tells Barry that she knows for a fact that Regina did not turn the gas on the stove, just like she did not take those barbiturates, as well as drink that alcohol. She believes that was put into the pot of coffee because Regina had always had a pot of coffee boiling. And when Mrs. Fletcher went into the kitchen, she noticed that there was no coffee on the stove. So, she says that Barry is the one that arranged for all of that to happen. It would be no surprise that the pressure of keeping up with the Broadway show, Patty being in the hospital and trying to stage her big comeback, would be too much for her and she would attempt suicide. Barry, of course, at first denies it. Mrs. Fletcher then points out that the mugger was someone that Barry himself had worked with on an unsold pilot in California, and they worked again. And Monty constantly pressured him to produce his ridiculous script, which we don't know what it's about. And Angela Lansbury, and this actor that plays Barry, is brilliant in this scene. Mrs. Fletcher gets up and says, "Barry, why are you lying to me? Your name shows up on his credits. You knew him. And when it all came into place, you decided to arrange for him to murder Patty. But when Patty didn't die, You got desperate and decided to try to kill your mother, because you would get all of her money if both of them were dead. You didn't care if the Broadway show ended up going on or not. Barry gets upset throughout and says, "Stop it! Stop it! You're making me feel like nothing, and I'll never feel like that again." He then gets angry and knocks everything off the mantel and then says, "There's not a moment where I did not dream of killing her. Do you know what it's like to be Regina Bosco's son, little boy, the washed-up actress that was high on alcohol and drugs and obituates? Patty, it was always Patty this and Patty that. She never loved me. She never cared about me. I couldn't sing. I couldn't dance. So yeah, of course I killed her. But it doesn't matter now, does it? She'll never love me. And it doesn't matter if I kill you either, Mrs. Fletcher." And suddenly, it's revealed that Regina is alive and well. Mrs. Fletcher, I guess, talked to her, and they arranged it with the doctor to say she had died. Regina was hoping against hope that Barry was not the killer, or the supposed killer, because no murders actually take place in this episode, and I think it's the only episode in the series where it doesn't. But she says, "I was so hoping that Jessica would be wrong." And Barry goes, "Oh, Mother, I'm so sorry." "Oh, Barry," she says, "how could you not know that I didn't love you?" Jessica goes back to Cabot Cove to work on her book, her next book, and Grady calls her from New York, telling her that the play has gone, the Broadway musical has gone off without a hitch. Patty and Regina are back in their respected roles as if nothing has happened to them. Apparently a big, huge, elaborate number was staged for the end of this episode with both Vivian Blaine and Luna Lunt, but it was cut for time, and I wish I could have seen it. We only see a little bit of it in the background when Grady's talking to Mrs. Fletcher. He tells her that him and Kate are no longer together because she's run off with some weatherman to Seattle. But don't to worry, he's found someone else named Francesca, and Sid has gotten his because he's under indictment for fraud. The last picture in your visual aid of Mrs. Fletcher on the phone is her reaction to Grady saying he's met Kate. And that picture also, which I've taken from the episode, has inspired many memes where they put at the top, "Hello, who's dead?" And that's the episode, guys. And the reason why I love this episode so much is because it has so many twists and turns. When I watch it, I'm still blindsided every single time that Barry ends up the killer. But let's talk about the guest stars. There was some noticeable guest stars in this, and let's go through them right now. Lou Feldman, the manager to Monty, was played by Milton Burnley. I can't say his last name. He unfortunately passed away in 2002 at the age of 93. He's known for It's a Mad, Mad World, The Muppet Movie, the first one, The Milton Berle Show, and The Loved One. He has over 110 credits to his name. His last known credit, poor guy, is Kenan and Kel. Two Heads Are Better Than None, a TV movie released in 2000. But I actually love Kenan and Kel. They were great. They're the reason why I love orange soda. He also guest starred on one of my other favorite sitcoms, Sister Sister, the original Roseanne, The Nanny, Beverly Hills 90210, Matlock, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, The Love Boat. This is his only episode of Murder, She Wrote, Pee Wee Herman's Big Adventure, Fame, Fantasy Island, Chips, The Brady Bunch for Variety Hour, Here's Lucy, Um, and he starred in a handful of MGM musicals and things, I'm sure. I don't think he worked with Angela Lansbury, but he was really good in this episode. Alright, next after him comes Vivian Blaine, who played Rita Bistel. She died in 1995 at the age of 74. She is known for Guys and Dolls, with Frank Sinatra, State Fair, Dollface, and Jitterbugs. She appeared in 39 different things, and this is her last known credit before she retired, so this is her only episode of Murder, She Wrote. She appeared in several MGM musicals. She was also on The Love Boat, Chips, Amanda's, which was a show that starred Bea Arthur from Maude and the Golden Girls before Bea Arthur was on the Golden Girls. She was also on Mary Hartman, and she starred in several MGM musicals. And the one that you see at the start of this episode is called Three Little Girls in Blue, released in 1946. So, awesome. Vivian, you are a wonderful singer. May you rest in peace. Then we have Elaine Garros as Lonnie, the actress that takes over Patty's part. She's still alive and she looks so familiar to me. She is known for Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Sex But Were Afraid to Ask, Gas, or It Became Necessary to Destroy the World in Order to See It, Magnum P.I., and Paternity with Burt Reynolds. She was in 58 different things. Her last known credit is in 2001 in Family Law. She guest starred on Ally McBeal, War of the Worlds. This is her only episode of Murder, She Wrote. Three's Company. Maybe that's where I've seen her. As Darlene and Randy Berkey, I don't know. The original Hawaii Five-0, Barney Miller, Marcus Webby, MD, Nancy Drew. Oh, I'm sorry, the new Perry Mason, sorry. Partridge Family, Love American Style. I probably saw her in Three's Company, that's probably what I saw her in. But this is her only episode of Murder, She Wrote. After her, we have Michael Horton, who plays Grady, who will basically have... Oh, I'm sorry. After him, Barry, our convicted murderer, is played by Greg Henry, who deserved a freaking Emmy for this episode. He is still alive. He is known for Guardians of the Galaxy. He played Grandpa, Paycheck, Body Double, and Stiller. Stiller something, a horror film. He's still acting to this very day. His last known credit is 2019's Stand with exclamation point. He guest starred on The Rookie, Channel Zero, Scandal, Black Lightning, American Crime Story, Supergirl, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 and 2. He also guest starred on Gilmore Girls, A Year in the Life, Chicago Med, CSI Cyber, which I like that show. I wish they wouldn't have canceled it. The Following, The Killing, Lizzie Borland Took an Axe. He's had quite an impressive career. CSI Miami, Grey's Anatomy, Glee, Castle, Dollhouse, ER, Gilmore Girls, 24, Star Trek Enterprise, Boston Public, CSI the original, And this will not be his only episode of Murder, She Wrote. He will appear in a handful of others. And like I said, he deserved an Emmy Award for this episode. He was fabulous. Okay, and then we have Michael Horton, who played Grady Fletcher. He will be in a handful of episodes because he's one of the few family members that has a recurring role on the show. He is still alive. He is known for Star Trek Intersection, Star Trek First Contact, Dances with Wolves, and the Incredible Hulk cartoon series. His last known credit is the TV series Judging Amy. He's been in 63 different things. He's done voice over work. He was in ER, the Extreme Ghostbusters cartoon series, Spider-Man the Animated Series. Of course, like I said, not his only episode of Murder, She Wrote. He will appear in a handful of others. And I was right. This is his first episode since the pilot movie that he appears in. He will also guest star in Matlock. And in Dances with Wolves, he played a captain in the extended version, so he technically wasn't credited because I guess they cut that. But he did some voice work for Transformers, G.I. Joe. So he has had an impressive career. I really like his character. Whenever he drags Mrs. Fletcher with him to somewhere, someone always gets murdered. Then, of course, the fabulous Luna Lunt, whose birthday is today. She was born on November 21st, 1952. She's known for Grease 2, Studio 54, Life with Judy Garland, Me and My Shadows, and Where the Boys Are. Her last known credit is Shaun Saves the World as Francine. She guest starred on Caroline in the City, The Nanny, and she'll appear in another episode of Murder, She Wrote, which I can't wait to watch. She appeared in Tales from the Dark Side and The Twilight Zone, as well as Trapper John MD, Grease 2 as Paulette, and she apparently was in her mother's last film, I Can Go On Singing, as a boat passenger, but she was uncredited for the role. I wish that they would cast her in more things because she's fabulous. She's an awesome singer. For some of these live musicals they did on TV, they should have casted her in something. Mac Faber, who is the director and is really mean to Rita and Patty, is played by Robert Morris, which he looks familiar to me. He is known for, oh yes, How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. See, I knew I saw him from somewhere. So he's got a Broadway background just as well as Angela Lansbury, so it's fitting for him to be in this episode. Mad Men, American Playhouse, and The Loved One. He's been in 75 different things. He has done voice work for Teen Titans Go as Santa Claus. Okay. He's also been on American Crime Story. Did voiceover work for Sophia the First, The Wild Thornberrys, Suddenly Susan, with that was a sitcom with Brooke Shields and Kathy Griffith. So funny. He did some voiceover work for Rugrats, Superman the Animated Series, Ah Real Monsters, Tiny Toon Adventures, Pound Puppies. He was in The Twilight Zone, Trapper John MD. This is his only episode of Murder, She Wrote. He was in the original Dukes of Hazzard, the original One Day at a Time, All My Children. And he was the voice of Jack Frost in that wonderful special we watch every year. Well, actually, they haven't shown it in a long time. Fantasy Island, Night Gallery. So he's had an impressive career. You go, dude. He was awesome in this episode. Then we have Patrick O'Neill um, as Sid Parrish, the banker who ends up going to jail for fraud at the end. He died in 1994 at the age of 66. He's known for Under Sage with Steven Seagal, the original Stepford Wives, In Harm's Way, and The Way We Were. His last known credit is a Perry Mason movie in 1993 entitled The Case of the Skin Deep Scandal. He's been in 118 different things. Hotel, this is his only episode of Murder, She Wrote. He also guest starred on Barnaby Jones, The Wild World of Mystery, The Doris Day Show, McCloud. He was in one of my favorite horror anthology series, again, Night Gallery. So Alfred Hitchcock Hour, Route 66, Outer Limits, awesome, love those shows. So he was awesome in this episode. May he rest in peace. The annoying lieutenant, who also looked familiar to me, was played by Gregory Serrera. He is still alive. He's known for the Towering Inferno. He played Carlos. I knew I'd seen him in something. He also is known for Beneath the Planet of the Apes, John Carpenter's Vampires, and Sanford and Son. He's been in 126 different things. His last known credit is a movie called The Other Side of the Wind in 2018. And this will not be his only episode of Murder, She Wrote. He will appear in a handful of others. He also guest starred on Ellen's original sitcom, simply titled Ellen DeGeneres' original sitcom, simply titled Ellen, Walker, Texas Ranger, Star Trek Deep Sea Nine, Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, The X-Files, The Golden Palace, which is a spinoff of The Golden Girls that didn't work, The Ray Bradbury Theater, another horror anthology series I love, the original Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, MacGyver, the original MacGyver, Growing Pains, The Monsters Today, Magnum P.I., Cadney and Lacey, Simon and Simon, Miami Vice. So he's had quite the impressive career. You go, dude. And I kept thinking I knew him from. I love The Towering Inferno. Me and my grandmother used to watch that movie together, and I always loved it. And I believe that is it. That's all the noticeable guest stars that I can see. Oh, Kate, Grady's love interest, was played by Cherie Gregory. She's still alive, and she is known for Joy of Sex, okay, The Fall Guy, Mass Appeal, and The New Mike Hammer. She's been in only 13 different things. This is her only episode of Murder, She Wrote. She was also in the TV movie Alice in Wonderland as the annoying sister. And she got started on The Jeffersons. Okay. And that's all our guest stars, guys. Like I said, I really love this episode because it's not simple and to the point. It has so many twists and turns, and I don't ever see that Barry is the killer. And the guy, Greg Henry, is so good. Just so good. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed talking about it. I hope everyone has a wonderful Thanksgiving and everyone is wearing their mask and safe out there in this crazy world we're living in right now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Happy crime solving!